Hello and welcome to our Why I Believe series, where we ask some of the members of St George's Church to explain why they believe. And Phil is joining me today to tell us a little bit of his story. Phil, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Pleasure to be part of it.
Great. And Phil, would you say you've always been a Christian, or is it something that's changed for you?
Oh, absolutely not. I've not always been a Christian. In fact, I didn't become a Christian until I become 51 years of age. I'm now 61 at present, and it was in March 2012 when I actually became a Christian. Yeah.
So how did it happen? What changed you?
Well, it was actually a visit from the minister of St George's at that particular time, Simon Smallwood. Actually came knocking on our door just for a chat. That was, as I say, we moved to this house in 2011, and it was a year later that Simon came and knocked on the door and introduced himself, and obviously did the polite thing and invited him in for a cup of tea and a chat and what have you. And basically, he obviously invited us to come to the service on the Sunday. And it's strange because we'd always, well, my wife, if I'm honest, my wife had for a long time wanted to start going to church. There'd been a few incidents in our lives which caused some heartache, but also some joy as well. But it wasn't until, as I say, we moved here in 2012 and Simon knocked on the door and had a chat and invited us over to the church on the Sunday.
And what did you find when you came to church?
Well, the first thing I noticed, it has to be said, was just the friendliness of the people that were there. I didn't know what to expect. If I'm totally honest, I only went because my wife Tammy wanted to go. I am my wife's carer. She's got some mobility problems, and obviously if she wanted to go, it meant really me having to go, if you like. And I was open-minded, but I wasn't, that bothered. But as soon as I walked through the door at St George's, it sounds strange, but as soon as I walked through that door, something happened, and I just haven't looked back since. Yeah, so yeah, just walking through the door, it's weird. Absolutely strange. But the friendliness of the people was the very first thing that I noticed.
And if you had to say what it means to be a Christian for you, what would you say?
Well, I mean, it means everything. It means everything to me now, because it's I grew up. If I can just give you a little bit of background of where we all started from, really. So my closest relationship to church was when I think I was about 4 or 5, and I was in a little group called the Imps, and it was similar to the Cubs and the Scouts, but it was for the very, very young, and it was attached to Elm Park Baptist Church. And the only thing I can remember, I can't remember any sort of learning anything or anything like that, but I do remember on Remembrance Sunday, being in my little uniform, walking around the streets with some other people, and someone was holding a flag, and that was basically it. But then after that, I left the Imps. As I say, my parents, I wasn't aware of them going to church at all. When we filled in forms, they basically where it says religion for me, they used to put C of E. So I think because of that, I thought, oh, I'm connected to the Church of England somehow. Not really understood what it was all about. Yeah, so I considered myself, belonging to the Church of England. And then, as I say, as time went on, I thought sort of good people went to heaven, bad people went to hell. I looked upon myself as a relatively good person. So as far as I was concerned, hopefully when it's my time, I would be going to heaven. Yeah, and that was it. As I grew up, I just thought it was about being good. That being a Christian was just about or being able to get into heaven was about being good. And of course, I soon found out otherwise when I started to hear the true message, of the gospel and what really Christianity is all about. As I say, I always believed there was a God, and of course, I always turned to him, as we do, when things were going wrong. I can't ever remember turning him to thank him for anything. It was really literally asking for things all the time. And as I say, if I can just quickly mention, we had a couple of sad situations. So in 2006, my wife sadly had to give birth to a baby, stillborn baby, 20 weeks into the pregnancy, and of course, when you're that far gone, you have to go through the labour, which was one of the horriblest things I've ever experienced. I was obviously there with her, and when I was in the hospital, the hospital chaplain came around, a guy called David, and he asked whether we would like to have a funeral for Thomas. We named him Thomas, and of course, at that time, we knew that you had funerals when you died, you had marriages when you wanted to get married, sort of thing, weddings when you wanted to get married. And so we said, yes, please, we'll have a funeral. And of course, we had a funeral for him. But then 1 year later, Tammy, my wife, became pregnant again with our son Tyler. And when Tyler popped out, it was all smiles and joy and tears of happiness. But very, very quickly, we noticed that there was something not quite right with his breathing. And he was quickly taken into NICU, the intensive care unit, and was in there for 2 weeks. He had so many things going on. We couldn't even see him. He had sort of, the breathing machine on. He had jaundice, so he had the thing over his eyes, and we really didn't even know really what he looked like for a good 2 weeks. And when you're in NICU, you start up at one end of the ward, and as you gradually get better, you move along. But anyway, we couldn't see him. Obviously in NICU you can't stay there all the time, and we was having to come home and leaving him in the hands of the hospital. The hospital turned around and said, he's got pneumonia. We've done everything we can. He had air around his heart, this, that, and the other. We've done all we can, and he said it's in the hands of God. And I thought that sort of like sparked a little thing up here, and how it's in the hands of God. So obviously we just thought, well, we trust in the hospital, not trusting God. We're trusting the hospital that they would do all they had to do. And then we were outside the ward, the NICU ward, and who should walk in but the chaplain who had done our Thomas's funeral. And basically he came and spoke to us. He said that he'd seen our name on a list that, and obviously my name being Chip is quite not that common. And he thought he'd come to see if it was us or not. And of course it was. He went in and said a prayer and everything. And from that moment, that's when my wife said, I need to start going to church. That was her words. I need to start going to church. And as I say, that was in 2007. But unfortunately, at the same time, my eldest son, Connor, was very badly, had really poor mobility. He was actually bedridden. which lasted a period of 2 years. He had major problems with his back, and he literally couldn't lift himself up at all. So I was caring for him for a couple of years. And although we'd said in 2007 that we wanted to start going to church, it was quite a busy life for us, looking after Connor and what have you. No one had come and knocked on our door where we was living at the time. So I had no contact with any church of whatsoever. And it wasn't until the council come and assessed us and said, you know, the house isn't suitable, because he was having to basically have his bed in the living room, and it was just unsuitable all round, that they said that they'd move us to a different property. And I mean, I know now, but I didn't know at the time, that the property that we are now living in, which is opposite St George's Church, had been sitting derelict for 15 years. It'd just been sitting there empty, and I didn't know, as I say, but the Lord obviously had it that this house was going to be ours. The council came and completely renovated the whole house for disablement, and as I say, we moved in 2012, and then, like I've already said, Simon came. 2011 we moved in. And in 2012, as I say, Simon came and knocked, and I can look back now and see where God was working through all that. Couldn't see it at the time, and I didn't understand anything, you know. But I can look back now and see that, God had this plan for us, and as I say, at 51 years of age, he hadn't given up on me. He came, he took me across to St George's, and as I say, that's where we've been ever since, and we just haven't looked back. And of course, that's where at St George's we got to hear the gospel, the truth, you know, what God was about, who he was, his personality, Jesus. Up till that point, I knew Jesus was born on Christmas Day and he died at Easter. Christmas to me was about getting presents, and Easter was about getting chocolate eggs, nothing more. But when I started to hear God's word preached at St George's, it just totally opened up a completely new look on life, and it was like a jigsaw puzzle being put together. You know, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. You know, this is what the world is for. This is what we're here for. What we're supposed to be doing. Why it was created. And looking around now, I look around now and see everything that's in the world, you know, like nature and all the rest of it, and I can really appreciate the sort of God that we have.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing, and thank you for being part of our Why I Believe. And if you come along on a Sunday morning, you'll probably meet Phil at St George's. Thank you, and God bless.